Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with Cool Guy.
So let's do some more cool stuff. We're going to take off the power steering pump, obviously the belt that goes with it, and then we will disconnect the lines, drain all that out, and then we'll take off the power steering gear too. Getting closer, someday we'll actually have this done. So unlike the alternator, as I'm looking at this thing, I'm trying to find a pivot point or a slot where you can release the tension that is holding this fan or this belt in place, but I can't find anything. It's all just a bunch of bolts and these two brackets. So I think we're just going to take off a whole bunch of bolts and see how this whole thing comes apart. I'm not going to drain this just yet, because this is a pretty big reservoir and there's a lot of brake fluid in there. So let's take off the brackets first and then we can drain this after that. So I'm just going to start with the ones that are closest to the power steering pump. This is the 9/16. I finally went out and bought myself a standard set of these ratcheting wrenches. And all you do is flip them over to tighten them up or loosen them up. Love these things. They're awesome. Highly recommend them. I guess it's 5/8. Alright, 9/16 up here. Now for the intake manifold. Jeez, that's going to be a breaker bar. So I've gone through with the breaker bar and I've basically broken the seal on every one of the bolts that I could get the breaker bar connected to. All the ones on this front bracket and this bracket are a mixture of either 9/16 or 5/8. Not that big of a deal. Interestingly enough, the two that are back here, this top one and this bottom corner one, that actually hold the power steering pump onto the bracket from the rear, are 15 millimeters. No idea why, just thought that that was really kind of bizarre. So I don't know if this is just a one-off, that they went to metric for this particular thing, or this could possibly be an aftermarket, but I doubt it. Anyways, 15 millimeters, 5/8, 9/16 all the way through. Just so you don't make the same mistake that I just did, especially in this scenario with the ratcheting only going one way. This bolt right here, as you loosen it up, basically wedges your wrench right into the pulley wheel for the power steering, so I don't really know how I'm going to get this thing out. My point is, I would wait to take off this bolt until you can get the whole assembly off. Alright, just got the front bracket off. This is a long bolt that goes right through the main halves, I guess you could say, of the actual holding bracket for the power steering. This one is 5/8. Both of these are 9/16. Now that I've got this bolt loosened up, and there you have it. Your brake, or your power steering pump, is now loose. Okay, now that we've taken off those two bolts from the engine block, there's one remaining bolt here that I haven't loosened up. And at that point, I should be able to take the whole back plate off of the power steering pump. This one's also 9/16. And there's the back plate, support plate. But from here, I'm going to disconnect both of these hoses. I'm going to put a pan underneath here because we need to drain out the reservoir. Once the power steering reservoir pump is removed, then you can take off your power steering to fan to main pulley off. This thing's as bad as the alternator one. Look how cracked that thing is. Let me see that. Yeah, this thing has seen its last days. Alright, next. Well, to mitigate as much of the mess as I know that I'm going to wind up creating with this, I'm going to use a turkey baster to drain the master reservoir of as much liquid as I can before I take off the back hoses. Yeah, balancing this thing on a body mount post is probably not the best way of going about it. Okay, this is probably not advisable, but we'll see how it plays out. Again, learn from my mistakes. I've got a funnel underneath here, and I've gotten this down to a fairly low level. This actually went a lot easier, a lot better than I thought it was going to. Well, that was a nice surprise. Okay, so now we can just unhook these things. This is a nut, a flange nut, and this is just a clamp. So let's take those things off, and then we have our power steering reservoir pump completely disconnected. This lower nut is 9/16, and this is going to have a pretty tough seal on it. Oh boy. Probably should have cracked the seal on this thing before I took it off of the actual wall. There's a lot of oxidation on this one. I'd be happy to replace all of these. Oh, there is some fluid there. But that's why we got our drip area. Show you this. The back part of the bracket. Once you've got those bolts and the pipes off, the hoses off, this obviously just comes right out. There's a little tooth that goes into the groove on the front part of the bracket. Last remaining bolt, right down here. And really the only way that you can get to it is with just an open crescent head. And you can't get a socket in there or anything else. For the most part, at least on some of these things, once you break the seal, they come off fairly easily. That's about maximum distance because it runs right into the pulley wheel at that point. And then you can just angle it out. And there you go. Now you have your power steering pump, your holding support bracket, your two plates that hold it into place, and a whole bunch of bolts that go with it.